Back to the topic at hand. In this movie, I'll show you how to refine the quality of your traced artwork using the threshold function, which is found inside the image trace panel. If I go ahead and scroll to, let's say, the bottom left corner of this tracing, you can see that Illustrator's traced a lot of what I was calling the schnivels. So while it's seen fit to ignore most of the artifacts, it has gone ahead and singled out either the largest ones or the ones that include the most contrast. Obviously, we need to get rid of them, but we don't want our cleanup to come at the expense of the fine details such as this line that's cutting through the wing. So we need to exercise a little bit of care. Well, fortunately, we can change the tracing anytime we like because Illustrator is always referencing the original pixel-based image. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and click on this traced artwork in order to select it with the black arrow tool. Then notice up here in the control panel that we've got this icon that says Image Trace Panel. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and sure enough, that brings up the Image Trace Panel, which is also, by the way, available from the window menu, just so you know. Now I want to go ahead and move this panel out of the way, but I don't want to drop it in with the rest of my workspace, so I'm going to drag from the far left side of the title bar like so. So I avoid this number, where I drop the panel in with either the expanded panels or the collapsed ones that are represented by icons. So I'll go ahead and move this panel right about there so it remains free-floating. Notice this view setting. It says tracing result, meaning I can see the result of the auto tracing. However, if I want to see the artwork in a different light, then I can go ahead and click on tracing result. And for example, I can select the source image to see the image file itself. Initially, that won't make any difference because the preview checkbox is turned off. If you want to see your changes as you apply them, then you either need to click on the trace button or turn on the preview checkbox. And I'm just going to turn on preview. And sure enough, there's my original pixel-based image. So I want you to see that is there all the time, and that remains a linked file, meaning that if I make some changes to the original file on disk inside of Photoshop or any other program and save those changes, they will be automatically reflected inside of Illustrator, and Illustrator will retrace my artwork accordingly. Again, linking is really the way to go. Anyway, I'm going to switch my view back to tracing result. Notice that mode by default is set to black and white, which is exactly what we're looking for. This threshold value allows us to decide what black and white are. So essentially what's happening is Illustrator is on the fly converting this grayscale image, which we saw just a moment ago. So notice if I switch back to source image, the original image is a bunch of grays. There is no such thing in this image as absolute black, and there's no such thing as absolute white, which is pretty typical of scanned artwork. That's kind of actually what you want from your scanner, because otherwise you're going to be clipping details and you don't want that. However, what Illustrator has to do before it can trace these black and white details is go ahead and convert the artwork to absolutely black and white. And that's what this threshold function does here. So I'll go ahead and switch the view back to tracing result. What threshold is doing is saying, okay, who gets to be black? That would be the less stuff. And who gets to be white? That would be the more stuff. And the threshold is the distinction between the two. Now, to fully understand what's going on with threshold, I'm going to turn off the preview checkbox. You need to understand what black and white are in the world of imaging. I'll go ahead and move this scroll bar all the way to the left until the value reads 1. A value of 0, if such a thing were possible here in this panel, a value of 0 is black. So when you enter a value of 1, you're saying 1 and 0, that's it. They're black and nothing else, which means very little about this artwork would be black, and just about everything else would be interpreted as white. And in fact, if I go ahead and turn on the preview checkbox in order to see the results of this change, sure enough, the entire artwork goes white, which obviously is not what we want. However, if I were to crank this value all the way up to its maximum, 255, which, believe it or not, is the definition of white in a digital image, then I'm saying everything that's 255 or darker, which is the entire image, by the way, that's going to be black. And then nothing's going to be white. And so if I go ahead and release, I was holding that scroll button for a moment, then the entire image turns black. Obviously, also not what we want. By default, this value is right in the middle. That is, it's 128, which is basically medium gray. And what we're saying here at this setting is anything that's darker than medium gray, convert that to black and go ahead and trace it with black. Anything that's brighter than medium gray, convert that to white and trace it with white. So what's the upshot of all this theory? Well, if you want to restore fine details inside of your image, if you're losing details, then you want to go ahead and increase this value. So notice if I take this value up to 200, I'm saying anything that's 200 or brighter, that's going to be white, and anything 200 or darker, that's going to be black. And if I press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac in order to accept that value, then you can see not only am I thickening up my line art, but I'm also introducing a lot more of those schnivels into the traced artwork. If I want to get rid of the artifacts at the expense of the fine details in my artwork potentially, then I would reduce the value. For example, if I take the value down to 40, I'm saying anything 40 or brighter is going to be white, and only that stuff that's 40 or darker is going to be black. And now I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac in order to accept that change. And sure enough, I go ahead and get rid of every single one of those dots, at least here inside this portion of the artwork. But notice that I am also reducing the width of this line right here. So I'm potentially losing some of the real detail inside of this artwork. Now, I eventually decided through trial and error that the best threshold setting for this specific image is 70. So I'll go ahead and enter that value in there, and then I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to apply it. And notice that that does bring back some of that line just a little bit. So it strengthens the detail inside of the artwork, but we do still have, well, at least one dust particle. Fortunately, threshold is not our only option for cleaning up the artwork. We also have this function called noise, and I'll explain how that works in the next movie.